This historic event was called the Red Summer of Hate because of how violent the events were and because of the amount of racial friction. It lasted from May to October with 25 riots. Some of those who have studied the Red Summer have concluded that these riots may have occurred because of multiple different factors. For example, labor shortages could have had a big impact on these riots because businesses were making a lot of profit. However, there were shortages because men were enlisted and couldn't work. Racial strife was another predicted factor because white working Americans resented the working African Americans simply because there was a competition to find jobs. Lastly, the Great Migration caused 500,000 African Americans to move from the South to the northern and Midwest cities to stop the labor shortages. African Americans were also leaving because they were attempting to avoid Jim Crow laws, segregated schools, and wanted to find better job opportunities. Although lynching was a form of riot during the Red Summer, some people suffered much worse. For example, the first act of violence took place in Charleston, South Carolina in May. That riot was the start of many worse. On July 19 in Washington, D.C., a white American started a riot when he heard that an African American had been accused of rape. White men beat down on African Americans by pulling them off of streetcars and beating pedestrians. Police did nothing. This riot lasted for 4 days, which resulted in 2 white American deaths and 4 deaths of African Americans. This is known to be one of the most significant riots of this time frame because, unlike many other riots, African Americans fought back. The most violent Red Summer race riot began on July 27 in Chicago. This event occurred when a 17-year-old African American male named Eugene Williams went swimming at a local beach and accidentally swam on the south side while white Americans were still swimming. Eugene was stoned and drowned while police officers refused to arrest or even attempt to stop the attackers. The riot broke out and lasted for 13 days. White Americans destroyed African American households. The result of this riot included 1,000 African Americans being homeless, 637 people injured, and 50 were killed. On July 31st, Major Walter H. Loving went to Lenox Avenue in Harlem in order to watch people buying newspapers. Word had gotten around that Chicago had just finished its riot, and Loving was concerned that the next ever would occur in Harlem because on July 19th, an agreement between an African American and a white American erupted. After having a disagreement in the bar, the white man took a shotgun, fired it 5 times and injured 2 bystanders. By the time that a police captain, as well as 15 police officers, showed up, the streets were filled with angered African Americans and the police had to disperse everyone to go home. On October 1st, white Americans tried to disband the Sharecrop organization. These white Americans attacked African American farmers. By the end of this riot, 100 African Americans were killed and 5 white Americans were killed. Claude McKay, a Jamaican singer and poet during the 1900s, wrote a poem. It was titled "If We Must Die" and was written after he heard about the almost riot in Harlem. It explains that he wants African Americans to stand up for themselves and their rights. After the riots were finished with, people suggested zoning laws. This proposed law was denied by some white and African American voters. A racial organization was put into place which was composed of 6 white Americans and 6 African Americans. They tried to narrow down the causes of the riots and find ways to prevent them from reoccurring. Their results include job competition, inadequate housing for African Americans, inconsistent law enforcement, and pervasive racial discrimination.